In 356 BC, Alexander was born, later to be known as Alexander the Great, the 14th king of the Kingdom of Macedonia. He rarely spent much time ruling in his homeland. During his reign, he devoted himself mainly to military campaigns of conquest and expansion, and he quickly became one of the most brilliant generals in history, subduing nearly the entire world as it was known to him. Many believe that Alexander was one of the greatest military strategists of all time. On the battlefield, the mighty king, mounted on his horse Bucephalus, proved his power wherever he rode. Alexander the Great became one of the most renowned monarchs of the ancient world, admired by posterity for thousands of years for his illustrious military achievements. Yet his death left humanity with endless reflection. Beyond official historical records, a poignant tale has been passed down among the people, telling of the final words and wishes of Alexander. It is said that in 323 BC, on his triumphal return after many campaigns of conquest, Alexander suddenly fell gravely ill. Realizing that death was approaching, he understood that he would not live to see his homeland again. The lands he had conquered, the mighty armies, the sharp swords, and the abundant treasures, all became meaningless at the threshold of death. According to legend, in those final moments, Alexander summoned his generals and closest attendants. The air in the chamber was heavy with grief. None could believe that the invincible emperor was about to depart this world. In exhaustion, Alexander spoke with a trembling voice. "I am about to leave this life. I have 3 final wishes, and you must fulfill them for me." Through tears, they listened as his last requests were passed down to posterity. 1. My coffin must be carried by the greatest physicians, so that all may see that when facing death, even the finest healers are powerless. 2. All the gold and jewels I have accumulated must be scattered along the path to my grave, so that all may see that wealth gathered in a lifetime remains forever in this world, and none can take it with them. 3. My hands must hang freely outside my coffin, so that all may see that man comes into this world with empty hands, and departs it with nothing as well. Having spoken, Alexander sighed deeply and slowly closed his eyes. A glorious life, a mighty empire had come to an end. Yet his death would leave behind mysteries that endured for more than 2,000 years. Historians have long debated, did Alexander die of natural causes, or was he assassinated? More recently, a research team at the University of Otago in New Zealand put forward a new hypothesis. Led by toxicologist Dr. Leo Shep, the group spent decades searching for evidence and rejected the theory that Alexander had been poisoned with arsenic or strychnine. Instead, they argued that the cause might have been the toxin of the white hellebore, a medicinal herb widely used in ancient Greece to treat nausea and vomiting. However, when fermented into wine, it could become a dangerous poison. In reality, when fermented, this herb had a very bitter taste, but it is possible that those who prepared the drink masked the bitterness with added sweetness, making it more appealing. As a result, the emperor consumed a considerable amount during the banquet, leading to intoxication and poisoning. For this reason, Dr. Shep and his colleague Scan dismissed the theory that Alexander was poisoned with other herbs such as hemlock or oleander, as their toxins were too potent and would have caused immediate death. In contrast, Alexander the Great endured agonizing pain for 12 days, becoming completely paralyzed and unable to move before passing away. Thus, the hypothesis involving white hellebore is regarded as the most plausible explanation. Even so, the researchers could not determine whether this was the result of a deliberate assassination attempt or simply a tragic accident. Some ancient historians also suggested that Alexander may have died from malaria or typhoid fever, both common diseases in Mesopotamia. Other theories have pointed to the possibility of an autoimmune disorder or acute pancreatitis. There are also opinions that Alexander's death was the result of a political conspiracy within the court. At that time, his empire stretched from Europe to the frontiers of India, so vast that even his closest generals began to fear for its future. Some historians have asked, if Alexander were to die suddenly without clearly naming a successor, who would control such an immense realm? Could it have been that this very uncertainty drove some of his attendants to plot his removal in order to seize power for themselves? However, to this day, this hypothesis remains only speculation. There is no direct evidence proving that Alexander was truly poisoned as part of a political conspiracy. The only certainty is this: his death left behind an enormous power vacuum, leading his closest generals to divide the empire among themselves, thus beginning the era of the Hellenistic kingdoms. Even now, more than 2 millennia later, the question of whether Alexander died of illness or assassination remains unanswered. This very mystery has made his death one of the most fascinating subjects in human history, further accentuating the image of a great emperor who passed away at the very height of his power. Historical records also note that Alexander the Great had a deep affection for Hephaestion, the commander of the cavalry and his closest companion since youth. The two were bound together in a relationship often described as that of lovers. In ancient Greece, same-sex relationships were relatively common and broadly accepted by society. Hephaestion had studied alongside Alexander in a group of young Macedonian nobles under the tutelage of the philosopher Aristotle, and their close friendship developed into a profound bond that lasted throughout their lives. In 324 BC, at the very height of his empire's glory, Alexander suffered a devastating personal blow. Hephaestion, his friend, brother-in-arms, confidant, and the most trusted commander of his cavalry, suddenly died after a brief illness. Hephaestion's death shattered Alexander. Historical accounts tell that he wept bitterly over his companion's body, refusing to leave until exhaustion overcame him. In his overwhelming grief, Alexander ordered a state funeral of the highest honors, one befitting a king. Temples across the empire were commanded to mourn. In Babylon, he had a monumental funeral pyre constructed to bid farewell to Hephaestion. It is said that from that moment on, Alexander was never the same. The loss was too immense, leaving the young emperor outwardly hardened but inwardly broken. To him, losing Hephaestion was like losing half of his own soul. In 336 BC, after the assassination of his father, King Philip II, Alexander officially ascended the throne of Macedonia. Not long after his coronation, he embarked on a series of relentless campaigns, continuously expanding his territories through his extraordinary military skill and strategic genius. Alexander subdued all of Greece, advanced into Asia Minor, Persia, Mesopotamia, and Egypt. He went further than any of his predecessors, pushing his army as far as the northern frontiers of India, reaching the basin of the Indus River. In just 13 short years, Alexander had built an empire stretching from Europe into Asia, encompassing nearly all of the great centers of civilization of the ancient world. He was also a truly undefeated commander, never once losing a battle in his military career. Alexander the Great grew ever more powerful, step by step becoming one of the most brilliant monarchs in history. To achieve such a glorious career, he trained relentlessly and was guided by two great teachers, his father, King Philip II, and the philosopher Aristotle. At the age of 13, by his father's command, Aristotle was invited to become Alexander's personal tutor. The great philosopher provided him with a strict and comprehensive education, preparing the young prince for the immense responsibility that lay ahead. Aristotle also instilled in Alexander a love for his homeland through the heroic poetry of ancient Greece, especially Homer's Iliad. This epic became Alexander's most cherished book, and he carried a copy with him throughout his life. Beyond knowledge, Alexander was also trained directly by his father in martial arts, military tactics, and real battle experience. At 16, while King Philip II led a campaign against Byzantium, Alexander was entrusted with regency over Macedonia for the first time. During this period, the Mede tribe in Thrace rose in rebellion, Alexander did not hesitate. He personally led the army to suppress the revolt. Demonstrating his early strategic brilliance, he swiftly crushed the uprising and captured the tribe's chief city. On that very site, he established a new settlement and named it Alexandropolis, meaning the city of Alexander. That first victory not only quelled domestic unrest, but also marked the beginning of a glorious military career, one in which Alexander never once tasted defeat on the battlefield. Alexander's influence stretched across all the lands he conquered, especially in Egypt. There he was welcomed not only as a liberator who freed the people from Persian rule, but also revered as a true pharaoh. The port city of Alexandria, which he founded, quickly grew into one of the greatest centers of civilization in the ancient world. After his death, Egypt fell into the hands of his general Ptolemy, who established the Ptolemaic dynasty, lasting nearly 300 years, a living testament to Alexander's enduring legacy. After years of relentless campaigning, Alexander advanced as far as northwestern India. There he defeated King Porus at the Battle of the Hydaspes. However, when Alexander sought to march his troops across the Hephaestion River, a major tributary of the Indus, to penetrate deeper into the subcontinent, his soldiers, exhausted and longing for home, refused to go further. Faced with this resistance, Alexander had no choice but to halt his advance and turn back. In 323 BC, on his return journey to Babylon, he fell gravely ill and died at the age of 33. The immense influence of Alexander the Great on the ancient world is undeniable. His conquests ushered in the Hellenistic Age, when Greek civilization extended far beyond its homeland, spreading from the Mediterranean to the basin of the Indus. Greek language, art, philosophy, and science blended with the cultures of the East, creating a brilliant legacy. That legacy endured for centuries until the Hellenistic kingdoms eventually fell under Roman control, forming the very foundation of Western civilization.